Hello. When I started my AI and machine learning journey way back in 2017, I knew the cloud, specifically AWS, would transform AI and machine learning and put this complex technology into the hands of developers all over the world. And where we are today with Gen AI, literally, this is what I've been waiting for since 2017. My introduction to Amazon Q really sealed the deal, letting me know that AI-paired programming is the future of development. And I truly believe that AI will boost productivity and transform the role of the developer in ways that we haven't even imagined yet. Hello, everyone. My name is Keisha Williams. I am Senior Director, Enterprise Architecture and Engineering at Slalom. And contrary to popular belief, I do not work for AWS, but I've been a machine learning hero since 2019. And I've worked with developers around the globe, helping them learn about Amazon Q and upskill and learn AI-paired programming practices. And I'm super excited to be here with you today. So, by show of hands, how many software engineers or developers do I have in the room? And I'm going to raise my hand because I have been coding Java since the late 90s, so I know I'm dating myself. Okay, now keep your hands up. Don't put your hands down yet. Keep your hands up if you have more than 10 Chrome or browser tabs open currently. And I actually have to put up both hands because I have way more than 10 across multiple browser windows across 1, 2, 3 MacBook Pros. I need help. So if you hang in with me, by the end of this talk, you will have the secret to staying productive while reducing the number of browser tabs you have open. That is a promise. So this is what we're going to talk about today. We'll start with the opportunity in front of us, and then we'll talk through deployment steps for deploying Amazon Q in the field. I've surveyed and interviewed a ton of developers, and there are 3 use cases that bubble up to the top regarding Amazon Q, and I'll talk you through those. I'll talk about lessons learned, and there are several. And we'll talk about challenges and solutions. And throughout that, we will have several demos included, 3 to be exact, 1 around new feature development, code explanation, and my favorite use case for Amazon Q, code transformation. Look at this developer. Doesn't she look stressed out? I'm sure she spent the last couple of days troubleshooting a pesky bug to no avail. Well, there are several developer tasks and challenges that Amazon Q can help solve. Contrary to popular belief, even in the age of AI, developers still write new code for now. Developers often have to refactor code. So think about migrating to a new framework or library version, updating your code, getting rid of tech debt. What about understanding new code? You're airdropped in a new code base and you have to quickly figure out what's going on. Production support, fixing bugs, and I hope we all write repeatable unit tests for our code and automating infrastructure. These are some of the ways that Amazon Q can help boost developer productivity. Of those ways, there are really 3 that keep coming to the surface when I talk to developers. 1 is around manual refactoring and code maintenance, just modernizing legacy code. Let's say you have Java 8, Java 11, and you need to migrate it to Java 17. Updating to the latest version of Spring Boot. You see, I keep talking about Java. I told you all, I've been coding Java for a long time. And the second one is around scaling code quality. Let's say you're a tech lead and you're responsible for a team of engineers. It can be quite challenging to maintain that consistent code quality across your development team. And enforcing the best practices and coding styles, Amazon Q can help you do that. And then handling large code bases. It's really hard to navigate complex code nowadays without AI. So, when you think about deploying Amazon Q, the first decision that you're met with is, do I use the free tier or the pro tier? Well, we all know where everyone starts because who doesn't love free? But you will quickly find that you'll hit the limits for the free tier, really requiring you to upgrade to the pro tier. So let's talk about the free tier. What comes with the free tier? You're able to code faster, and have code suggestions in your IDE, the CLI, or the AWS console with the free tier. You're also able to have limited access to some of the advanced features, and we'll talk about that and I'll demo a few. Now, when we talk about the limits that you'll hit, 50 chat interactions per month. Now, if you code on a daily basis, you'll quickly hit that limit. 5 developer agents. So I'll talk more about this, but whenever you're developing new features or transforming your code, Amazon Q spins up an AI agent in the background to do the work that you want it to do. You're limited to 5 of those. If you're migrating your code, you're limited to 1,000 lines of code on the free tier and 25 queries in the console. Organizations tend to choose the pro tier, so let's talk about that. With the pro tier, you're able to manage your users and provide security policies and really keep track of how your engineers and developers are using Amazon Q. You're also able to customize Amazon Q. If you're familiar with Gen AI and terms like fine-tuning, where you take a large language model and you customize it or you train it on your proprietary data, Amazon Q allows you to customize it on your code base. So it learns your coding style and your coding standards. That comes with the pro tier. And then you have high limits to some of the advanced features that I just mentioned. Notice it's not unlimited with the pro tier, and I understand why, because it's Gen AI, it's costly, and there's a lot of energy consumption. So you still have limits with the pro tier, but just higher limits. The subscription cost for the pro tier lands at around $19 per developer per month. And I'll talk more about a way to really manage your subscriptions so that you're not wasting money. The second decision that you're met with is, how do I authenticate to Amazon Q? There are actually 2 ways that you can authenticate through the IDE. The first is using an AWS Builder ID. So for all of the developers and engineers, by show of hands, who has an AWS Builder ID? Most of us do. So this Builder ID is really just a unique identifier for a developer, and it allows a developer to play around with Amazon Q without having a full-blown AWS account. That's the first way to authenticate. The second way is to use the AWS IAM Identity Center. Now, with the developers that I've worked with, they want to quickly play around with Amazon Q, so they create a Builder ID, they log in, and they start playing around. Now, organizations that want to scale Amazon Q will set it up through Identity Center. So let's look at what that type of setup would look like. When you're ready to roll Amazon Q out on an enterprise scale, definitely recommend setting up SSO, single sign-on. It allows you to match your users' corporate credentials and provide a secure way for your developers to access Amazon Q. Now, developers can actually log into different instances of Amazon Q, so they can log in with their builder ID, or they can log in through SSO that an organization has set up. They can log into a client instance. It's very easy to swap between the different instances. So let's look at how you would set up this SSO integration. You have your identity provider, so let's say AD, Active Directory, which is now rebranded to Microsoft Entra ID. So you'll provision your users through that Azure SCIM process to the AWS IAM Identity Center. And from that, you have your user and group information that flows down to Amazon Q to create a group. Within that group, you have developers, and those developers need subscriptions. And remember, I said it's $19 per month for each developer in that Amazon Q group. So you pay monthly based on the number of users. And so your developers authenticate through an IDE like Visual Studio Code shown on the diagram. Then they are able to prompt and send in code questions and get a tailored response back from Amazon Q. Like I mentioned before, it is really important to manage this group because you will pay whether or not developers are actually using Amazon Q. So it's great to have maybe a tech lead or a group admin to monitor the usage. And there's a really cool Amazon Q dashboard that I'll show you that will help you track that easily. The next step is to install the Amazon Q extension or plugin based on the browser that you're using. In this example, I'm showing you VS Code. There is an Amazon Q extension. Now, I do want to call out, it is not the AWS Toolkit extension, if you're familiar with that. That will not give you access to Amazon Q. So you set up your extension, you can install it in VS Code. You can also access Amazon Q through JetBrains, so think IntelliJ, the full-blown version of Visual Studio, and via the command line on a Mac. When you're using Amazon Q, there are two types of developer experiences. First, you have your interactive developer experience, and then you have your asynchronous developer experience. Across the two, I've highlighted in green the most common use cases that I've heard from developers that use Amazon Q. So from the interactive side, think of that as just like the conversation, having a back and forth like chatbot conversation with Amazon Q. You're able to get inline code generation, and you're also able to do the customization like I mentioned before. On the asynchronous side though, it's really not a back and forth chat because what you're asking Amazon Q to do will take time. It could take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, really based on the size of your code base. So doing things like code transformation from Java 8 to Java 17, new feature development, and also security scans. So when I survey developers, there are really three main use cases that pop up. But then there's one use case that was very surprising to me, and I just had to put it on here and talk to you all about it. So one popular use case is writing Python code. So I interviewed one developer who was a TypeScript expert. And he was dropped on a project where he had to write Python code. And he was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? I don't know Python. So what he did, he wrote the code out in TypeScript and then sent it to Amazon Q and said, rewrite this for me in Python. And Amazon Q did that. Not only did it do that, it also gave him best practices, code style tips for writing Python. So he is definitely a believer. Next, understanding a new code base. So whenever you're airdropped into a new code base and you need to quickly come up to speed, as a developer, we typically look at the code, we look at the comments, if there are comments, we look at the documentation, if there's documentation, We'll look at a user guide, training materials. We may reach out to the BA to understand the business rules. Now we can use Amazon Q in that workflow to quickly come up to speed on a complex code basis. And if you're not an expert at Terraform or HCL and you need to be, well, Amazon Q is. And what's really great about Amazon Q, you don't have to start with a blank page. It will give you Terraform code that you can then review, tweak, and refine. Okay, so for this last use case, this was very surprising. And this is the point in the presentation where I check to see if people are awake. So, repeat after me. Excel is not a database. And I'll just leave that there. So when I had the conversation with this developer, it was very surprising that he actually used Amazon Q to help him understand complex Excel formulas and to also write Excel formulas. Okay, so a sample prompt, and this is where we're going to start to talk about in demo, new feature development. So where you start with a completely blank slate and Amazon Q does everything for you. So you could send in a prompt like this: create a Flask API for managing a to-do list. The API should have endpoints to add a new task, retrieve a task, update a task, and delete a task. Basically all of the CRUD operations. Amazon Q will come back and say, okay, let me create a plan. This may take a few minutes. So let's see this demo of new feature development, and I will talk you through this. So here we are in Visual Studio Code. If you notice on the, I need to play it. If you notice on the left-hand side at the very bottom, there's the Amazon Q extension that I installed. Here I'm sending in the prompt that we just looked at. I'm going to use the /dev command, and that is for creating new features. And I sent in that prompt, create a Flask API for all of the CRUD operations. And Amazon Q comes back and says, okay, let me create a plan. This may take a few minutes. So on the back end, it is spinning up that AI agent that I mentioned to you to actually create from scratch this Flask API. And it does take a few minutes, but then if you notice at the very top, there's this new tab that popped up called QDev. And in that, it gives a plan that Amazon Q will follow to actually write this API from scratch. So here it's showing it's going to create app.py. It's going to import the required modules, create a route for adding a new task, create a route for retrieving a task, updating a task, and deleting a task. And it gives you very detailed, I'm going to use the delete method, get a task ID, and then 6 is telling us it's going to create a main block for testing our API. So if we're good with that plan, we click on that blue Generate Code button. Amazon Q says, I'm generating the code. Give me a few minutes. And then it shows you this code suggestion. And then there's a green Insert Code button if you're good with that. And I did this on the free tier. So notice it says I have 2 out of 3 code iterations remaining. I quickly hit the free tier limits. Okay, so the code is now added under the File Explorer. Click on that. And now you see this app.py. So Amazon Q created this entire Flask API with all of the CRUD operations in a matter of minutes. So there's a function for adding, getting, updating, and deleting. And lines 51 through 53, that's the main block for testing our API. Okay, so we have this code. We need to test it to make sure it actually works. So there's that run button. It spins up this development server. So now let's navigate to Postman so that we can test the API. There's a route here for getting the task. So let's test that. Click the send button, and nothing comes back. That's to be expected. We haven't added any task yet. So now let's go down and add a task. I've filled out the body. The task description says checking code to the repo, and the status is not started. So let's test this API. Click send. And then I get a response back with a unique identifier for that task. So now let's go back to our get task API just to make sure it actually saved it. Click on that. Remember, it was blank before. And now let's click send. And there you have it. Amazon Q wrote that code that actually worked in a matter of minutes. Let's have another demo. So this demo is around code explanation. This is where you have your code already and you just need help understanding it. So let's say we have code that has a factorial function. We'll send in this question, what is the factorial function doing? And Amazon Q will come back with a very detailed description. So let's see this in action. Here we are still in Visual Studio Code, but notice this time, like I mentioned, I have the code already. So in this prompt window at the bottom, going to just put the simple prompt, what is the factorial function doing? Going to click send, and Amazon Q is getting the answer. It's going to take a couple of seconds, but then notice how it's streaming back the answer so you don't have to wait. And it's very, very detailed. So let's scroll up. So here it's saying the factorial function in the provided code calculates the factorial of a non-negative integer n. The factorial of the number n is the product of all positive integers less than or equal to n. And then it goes through and it gives you examples of how to call this function. It gives you what the example output will be, and it shows the sources. And it's very detailed. Instead of writing a prompt, you could also go to this menu option and do Amazon Q explain. So if we scroll down, let's try that out on lines 43 through 54. What is that section doing? So highlight it, do a right click, go down to explain, and notice that it creates the prompt for you in that blue box. So it has the prompt, it sends in the code, and then Amazon Q again streams back the answers. It explains it, it shows you example calls with example output. Now there's one more thing that I want to show you, but before I do that, here we can just look at the description. It's saying the provided code block is a Python dictionary that stores the results of various function calls. Now, the one thing that I want to show you before we end this demo, if you scroll up, look at line 40. There's a comment that says a function that calculates the max of 5 numbers. It is really cool that Amazon Q can just read your comment and then generate that code for you. You see, it generates the code, we review the code, and if we like the code, we accept the code, and now that code is a part of our code base. And what I really like is that Amazon Q was smart enough to use the max function and not try to write that logic itself. So, before rolling out Amazon Q, I had a ton of questions around safety and security. And I'm showing you the top 4 questions here that I often get from developers when I meet with them and we talk about Amazon Q. Honestly, I sent AWS 12 very detailed questions about Amazon Q around safety and security, and to their credit, they answered all of these questions for me. So let's talk about the first question and the answer that I got back from AWS. How do we ensure our data and code samples aren't used to train your models? If you're familiar with the Gen AI space, it's a huge problem where vendors can actually track your data. So the prompts that you send in and the responses that come back, and they can use that to actually retrain or improve their models. And with Amazon Q, the answer to this question was not with the Pro tier. So if you're on the Pro tier, you don't have to worry about AWS using your data to improve Amazon Q. However, if you are on the free tier, you have to explicitly opt out so that your data is not used. The next question, how often is the Amazon Q Foundation model updated? Are updates automatic? And I actually posed this question to AWS twice. Once when Amazon Q was in beta, and the second time when Amazon Q was generally available, and the answer did change over time. So I'm happy with the final answer. That is, updates, one, are applied quarterly, and those updates are automatic. When you're working with Gen AI and large language models, it's very important for you to be on the latest version, because the latest version is more efficient, smarter, and will produce better results. So with Amazon Q, updated on a quarterly basis, automatic, you're using the latest version. Third question I had, and this is really coming from my enterprise architecture hat, how does Amazon Q handle large volumes of concurrent requests, which might be typical in a large enterprise setting? Just really thinking through, how do I scale this across a large engineering team? And the answer that came back from AWS is Amazon Q is fully managed, so we don't have to worry about scaling. And then the last question, which is very important, who owns the code generated by Amazon Q developer? And the answer that came back was, you own the code. Even if you're starting from a blank slate and you're using Amazon Q to do new feature development, you own that code. So it's very important that you review the code, you test it and make sure it works before putting it in production, because it's all you. Now let's talk about that Amazon Q dashboard that I mentioned to you. This is one of the benefits of being on the Pro tier. If you roll out Amazon Q across your organization, you're able to track how developers use it and how often they use it. So let's talk through these metrics. Now, this dashboard is only available to Amazon Q administrators, and it will really help you evaluate your productivity gains and really make a strong business case for using Amazon Q. So the first metric is around user activity, and that is that graph or the squiggly line that you see. And so what that is telling you, based on all the subscriptions you have, let's say you have 200 Amazon Q subscriptions that you're paying $19 per developer per month for, this shows you each day how many subscriptions are actually being used. So let's say we have 200 developers subscribe to Amazon Q. This graph is telling us that only 6 of those developers use Amazon Q on a daily basis. So that should set off a lot of alarms and alerts that there's this low adoption rate of Amazon Q. So now you're able to be proactive, figure out why they're not using Amazon Q, and potentially remove them from the subscription so that you're not wasting money. Next up is lines of code generated. So how many lines of code did Amazon Q generate for you? This example shows 773. The next is the acceptance rate. So of the code suggested by Amazon Q, how often did your developers actually accept those recommendations. And so that is at 23%. And then the next is the percentage of code written by Amazon Q developer. And that's really looking at your entire code base. In this example, 11%. And then the last metric is accepted recommendations with references. So right here on this screen, there's not enough data to have metrics, but this is where your developers accept recommendations, but there are references to open source projects. So that will help you track that. So now let's look at lessons learned. The first is if your organization does not have a Gen AI or AI acceptable use policy, it is very important that you put one in place. I've heard horror stories of developers being fired on the spot because they used Gen AI in a way that was not acceptable to their organization. So it's important to give developers guardrails so they understand the expectations for the company that they're working with. And if you have an AI policy that does not account for AI paired programming, it's important to add that to your policy. The second is the developer onboarding plan. It is very important to onboard developers to Amazon Q so that you don't see like what we saw on the dashboard where you're paying for 200 subscriptions, but only 6 developers are actually using it. So it's important to have this onboarding plan and really try to work Amazon Q into the developer workflow when they're being onboarded to a new code base. We talked about how Amazon Q can help explain complex code, helping developers come up quickly. Next, credits covering the POC. If you're an AWS partner, you will have access to credits. You could use those credits to roll out a small POC or proof of concept within your organization using a limited number of developers, maybe 5 developers, 10 developers, to really help prove out Amazon Q and to see if it will work in your organization. And then those developers that are part of the POC, you can then use them to become internal advocates for Amazon Q, increasing the adoption rate across your team. Again, so if you're paying for 200 developers, you have 200 developers actually using the tool. Okay, so a few people left, so they're gonna miss this secret about reducing your Chrome tabs. They'll have to watch the recording. This was a very interesting lesson I learned when talking to developers that use Amazon Q. So one developer told me, he said, I've noticed now that I'm using Amazon Q, I'm still productive and I don't have as many Chrome tabs open. And I'm like, well, tell me more about that. That's very interesting. And he said that now he no longer needs to Google. He no longer needs to go to Stack Overflow. Whenever he has a question code related, he goes directly to Amazon Q. And so a side effect of him using Amazon Q, and it helped him reduce the number of Chrome tabs. I'm sure that wasn't the goal that AWS put in place when they rolled out Amazon Q, but it is a very nice side effect. Another lesson learned, that developers became expert prompt engineers. And so I was interviewing a developer, and he made the comment, I'm noticing that the responses just keep getting better and better over time. And I can't quite figure out if I'm becoming better at prompt engineering or if Amazon Q is becoming smarter. And actually, I think it's a little bit of both. So as you're working with Gen AI tools and you have to prompt them and you're working with them on a daily basis, you just get better and more efficient at writing prompts that give you back the answers that you want. And then I mentioned to you the quarterly updates that you get with Amazon Q. So Amazon Q just continues to get smarter and smarter. So if you played around with Amazon Q and you tried it out and you just weren't impressed and it just didn't seem to work right for you, I'd say try it again. I'm pretty sure it's smarter now. And then also practice some advanced prompt engineering skills and you may be surprised. All right, let's talk about some challenges and solutions. So, some of the developers that I talked with noted that Amazon Q tends to struggle with large files and that they need to split those files into smaller chunks in order for Amazon Q to be effective. And another way to get around that, and like I showed you in the demo, you can really go function by function as well. So explain this function, instead of trying to explain the entire code file. There were usability challenges when using the Visual Studio Code extension. So if you remember back to our demo, we had in Visual Studio Code at the very bottom, there was this Q tab. In order for you to talk to Amazon Q, you actually have to be on that tab. So there's not an easy way for you to go through the file explorer and have a conversation with Amazon Q. Actually, 2 or 3 weeks ago, AWS released a new feature for Amazon Q, and it's called inline code suggestion. So imagine you're in the Visual Studio Code, you're looking at your code file, and at the very top of the code file, instead of a separate extension and chat window, you're able to have that conversation with Amazon Q right inside of your code. So that will alleviate this challenge. And then customizations. We talked about customizations earlier, and it's just a way to teach Amazon Q about your code base, how you code, your code style. Few developers that I talked with around customizations, they couldn't get it to work because their code repos weren't large enough. And so you need at least 20 megabytes of data in order to train Amazon Q. And when I think about where we are today with Gen AI and where it's headed in the future, we'll be able to train these large language models with smaller and smaller data sets, still getting the same efficiencies and performance. So one day in the future, this may not be a problem. Okay, now this slide is all about my personal experience with Amazon Q. So I saw before that we have a lot of software engineers in the room, but how many Java developers do we have? Okay, quite a few. Java is still my favorite programming language. Like I mentioned, I started coding it in the late 90s. So I was super excited about the code transformation feature of Amazon Q. So taking my Java 8 code and automatically updating it to Java 17. So going into that, I had several expectations as a Java developer. I expected Amazon Q to modernize my code by implementing best coding style and code style improvements. That did not happen. I expected Amazon Q to use the local var type inference. I expected it to use optional if present or else for cleaner code. I had a lot of expectations. I expected it to use the stream API instead of traditional for loops, Lambda expressions for more modern, efficient thread creation, and it did not do that. And so I actually thought it was an issue with Amazon Q. So I reached out to the product team and they said, no, that's by design. And so I said, can we add this to the backlog? As a Java developer, a part of modernizing code, to me, also includes making code style changes and improvements. So they've added it to the backlog. If you ever see this new feature, you know who to thank. It would be me. So fingers crossed that that is actually added. So now let's see this code transformation Java 7, Java 8 to Java 17 in action. So here we are in IntelliJ. We have a very simple Java file that generates a random number, writes out a few strings, etc. So I've installed the Amazon Q plugin, and you'll see it on the far right-hand side. And the transform command is what you use to transform your Java code. So you send that in, it will ask you which module you want to upgrade, and it will ask you your target Java version, in this case, JDK 17. And you click that button, and it tells you, I'm going to build your module. This can take up to 10 minutes, depending on the size of your module. Here on line 7, I've highlighted this data type converter because I expect it to update this line to the correct and newer package. And so Amazon Q says, I was able to build your project, and now it's going to start. It's kicking off that developer agent in the background to do the transformation for me. You'll see that it will start to update, and this is one of the asynchronous developer experiences I told you about. You'll see that it's in this transformation pane down here. It's telling you all of the steps that it's doing on the back end and checking off with a green check mark once it's complete. Now, I did cheat and skip ahead, and the running time for this was 5 minutes and 36 seconds for one Java file. And so here you're able to view the transformation plan, similar to what we did in VS Code. So here it shows the lines of code in my application, 50, the dependencies to be replaced, 3, the deprecated code instances, 0, and then the files to be changed. In this case, just one file. So if we scroll down, it shows you the plan, what it's going to do, and the file that it's going to change. So legacy.java. Now, if we come down and click on this View Diff, it opens the diff viewer so that you can see the changes. So first, there's this legacy.java file. Let's open that. The left-hand side is the original. The right-hand side is the updated. And there on line 7, notice it changes the package from JavaX to Jakarta. That's one of the changes I expected. Let's close that. Now let's look at the POM file. So this shows you that it needs to be a Maven project in order to do your transformation. Made one change to use a newer version of JUnit, and then it added this properties tag with the source, target, and release of Java 17. So let's close that, and we'll go ahead and accept these changes by clicking on OK. And it says it applied it successfully. Now there's the summary tab where it just really highlights everything that we just talked about. But what's really important is at the bottom, because it shows you the steps that you need to follow to apply these changes. So we did step 1 already, which is the diff viewer, viewing and accepting changes. Now, number 2 is really important. Here it's talking about you need to update locally your Java project to use Java 17. And then here on line 7, we have that red error. Remember, it changed it to Jakarta. Because I'm using a Maven project, I need to add those dependencies. IntelliJ makes it very simple. It's searching for the data type converter. It found it. Let's add it. And now we need to update the project to Java 17 so that it will compile. So we're changing it from 8 to 17. And then click on OK. So at this point, we should be able to execute our code by clicking that triangle in the upper right-hand corner, and voila. It runs correctly. It prints a random number. It prints the list and the string. It's my favorite use case for Amazon Q. All right, let's bring it all together. Remember the stressed out developer from the beginning? She looks really happy now, doesn't she? And this is the consistent feedback that I've gotten from developers that use Amazon Q, that it allows them to accelerate their workflow, reduce repetitive tasks like writing unit tests and debugging, and allowing them to focus on higher value activities like the how and why behind your code, thinking about system design, producing less tech debt because now you have the time to do it right the first time. So as we wrap up, I always get this question and this fear from developers about AI replacing them. If there's one thing that I've learned, that AI won't be replacing us anytime soon, at least not in our lifetimes, but it will make us more creative, more efficient, more capable, and more productive. So if you would love to continue your learning journey with Amazon Q, I've released a new course on LinkedIn Learning just in time for reInvent. It's called AI Paired Programming with Amazon Q. We will talk more about generating code, fixing bugs, using it from the CLI, how to set it up in the IDE, how to optimize SQL, and all of the examples are in Java, and I put some Python in there as well. So if you'd like free access, just ping me on LinkedIn and I'll send you a link. Thank you so much for your time. We have time now for questions.